Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Data Center Exchange. Now, I'm very much looking forward to this episode because I think it's going to give us some real insight into a very important and strategic business process. I guess it's one that's not necessarily only applicable to the data center world, but it is one that I would say is more common across this industry than most others out there. Because as we see in the news on a very regular basis, this is an industry with a high volume of merger and acquisition activity. And when they take place, there is normally a process of integrating whole businesses or business units together. And I guess it's how businesses navigate that integration process, which I really want to explore today, as I imagine it to be pretty complex, pretty sensitive at times, and also challenging. And it's probably where the opportunities are as well. So when I set out to record this episode, I wanted to try and lift the lid on it and bring in somebody that has been through this process himself. And I found someone that's going through this right now and leading his business through this very time in this very point in time. So without further ado, I wanted to invite and introduce Jeremy Pease, CEO of Colohouse and Hivelocity to the Data Center Exchange. Jeremy, welcome to the Data Center Exchange.
Thanks, Dal. Appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about what you pointed out as a very critical and important part of the process in this space and in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely is. But before we get stuck into that, I want to talk a little bit about you and your background personally, and how you entered the data center world and where your career started. Really, just give us a bit of a background into yourself.
No, I appreciate that, Del. So yeah, absolutely. IT was always a part of my life. I had it in the household, and so started help desk right off the bat, right? Just start at the very ground floor and worked my way up. It was an interesting background because I did a little bit of networking, I did a little bit of development. Even at one point after a good 6-year run of doing developing, I then went into recruiting IT and project management, and then through all of that, it led me into the management track of the business. And when I was managing a significant amount of infrastructure for a SaaS company, I was heavily involved with the data center space, obviously with a cloud provider that was managing all of our solutions and tying all that together. And when it was time for me to move on from that job, I talked to that company because I built some great relationships. And that was hosting.com. And that's when I made the shift over in 2014. So, as I said, shifted to the dark side somewhat. But it's been an amazing experience working on on this side of the business. I've had a lot of experience in cloud, BareMetal, data center, co-location, network and connectivity, all the different pieces of it. And really built my career from there to eventually coming here to Colohouse and now with the acquisition of Hivelocity as the CEO, and really excited about what we're building right now.
Yeah, it certainly seems exciting times for you guys, which we'll get stuck into in a little later in the episode. Just give us an insight in what your main role is now. Obviously CEO, but that can incorporate lots of different and a range of skills and duties. So give me an insight into, if you can, about what your sort of current focus is and what you're up to now.
Yeah, absolutely. With this being my first CEO role, obviously I've learned a lot about what that means and what that daily picture looks like. For me right now, a huge focus is obviously integration, which we're going to talk about as we just acquired Hivelocity. So, the teams are very focused on how we integrate the organizations together, both from a technology perspective, but from a culture perspective as well. And I've been spending a lot of time out here at the main headquarters of Hivelocity pretty much every week since we made the acquisition. And a lot of that is to build culture, to communicate with the teams here, and make them feel comfortable about that transition. And then obviously, there's some new components to the board when you do this. So communicating with the board, the private equity firm, part of my job is also, fundraising as needed, going out there and going to market with that. And then guiding the leadership team across what we need to accomplish and where we're going. And then constantly looking at different, mergers and acquisition opportunities. So there's so many things on a regular basis that, you just do your best to keep each one of those going in the right direction. But that has a lot to do with, my daily, weekly focus right now here.
Yeah. Okay. And you've got so much on. I'm eternally grateful that you're spending an hour talking to us. So thank you for that. But I know that you're not necessarily new to mergers and acquisitions in your time. So going on to the topic now, can you give us a bit of a background into what you've been a part of over your years in the career in the industry, in your career in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, hosting.com, the first one, I would say a bit, little over a year after I started, we acquired a database services company, really focused on what we were going to do to be able to continue to expand the services on top of the cloud and co-location platform that we had created. And so, that was a very interesting integration because it's very different than any of the other pieces of the business. So, how did that fit in? How is the technology going to fit in? And then you have your standard pieces, right? How is HR going to come in? How are all the different components, marketing, sales? How are we going to do all of that? How do you pull all that together? But then again, systems and technology, which is one of the main components to it all, was another interesting piece that we had to figure out. So, and then at Contigix, I was really responsible for mergers and acquisitions. So the first one we went after was a company called Black Mesh, and we acquired them. And then, that was a piece where we were really doing application hosting and really trying to go up the stack a little bit further. And they had done a great job at that. It also brought FedRAMP certification to the company, which we didn't have before, and some really high profile clients, which was exciting. And we really impressed with their security profile of how they ran their organization, which I felt like was something we really needed at the time to step things up. So and then I will say, while also in that role, we were looking for an Atlassian services partner, and there wasn't really anything on the market. And so my private equity firm at the time said, "Hey, go out and just find these companies. Just start emailing CEOs." And I did. I actually got a CEO interested. We closed that deal. And so responsible for the integration of that company. Again, something very different, a services piece and component. And then while at DataBank, and I've worked on split offs as well, but when talking about pulling an integration at DataBank, we acquired Colo, which was a massive undertaking. We were 20 data centers, they were 44, right? And so, almost taking a company that was more than 1.5 times our size was probably the most challenging integration I've ever been a part of. And really my responsibility in that one was a lot on the technology side. How are we going to ingest the customers? What systems are we going to use? How are we going to do all of that? And so heavily involved in everything that came down with that. And I would say for such a large project, we did that within a year, which was really impressive. And it speaks to the talent on the team. And then here, when I came in, Colohouse had acquired 6 companies before I came in, but really hadn't done the integration work yet. They were kind of holding for a CEO who could do all of that work. And so it's been a lot of that. And just as we kind of get ourselves in a place where we start to feel good and we're ready to move on, we make another acquisition, and now it's time to integrate all over again. So yeah, it's been a big part of my career for over a decade now of doing these integrations in so many different ways.
Yeah. Okay. Really, really good. It sounds like you're perfectly positioned to lead you guys through the next sort of period of that integration. But you've obviously been exposed to it a significant amount in relatively short career span in some ways. So I guess, why is it so common in this industry that you can be exposed to it? Because I know there's people that listen to this podcast that aren't in the industry, and it does happen more often than many others out there. So why is it so common across the digital infrastructure world?
Yeah, I think it's really because companies see the ability for synergies and opportunities between these organizations, and it's a way to grow geography, it's a way to grow and scale size, way and grow to scale services. Right? It is the quickest, and in many cases, sometimes the most financially advantageous opportunity is to acquire another company to do that piece of the business. And others just do it to grow and scale at a fast pace, right? I mean, Equinix, they just went out, and when Steve Smith was running it, was what are the two largest, providers in that space? I'm going to buy one of them, right, in that geography, and that's how we're going to expand, and that's how we're going to grow, and that's how it became, the massive company that they are today. So it really is, and there's a lot of money invested in this space, a lot of private equity, a lot in terms of, you have some public companies that are obviously of size, but really those were usually built by private equity firms that then decided to take it public, right? And so there's a lot of equity invested in this. If you look at this space, you see billions and billions and billions of dollars. Every week there seems to be an announcement of somebody who raised somewhere from 500 million to $2.5 billion every week. So there's a lot of money in this space, and that's the way to grow, to scale, and to provide, a full portfolio of services that you can go after in this space.
Yeah, and I can only assume that over the next 2, 3 years with AI, it's only going to increase. There's going to be so much more of this happening. Yeah. So I'm always interested when you come to a merger acquisition. At what point as a business leader do you start to think in your mind about integration and the challenges and opportunities of bringing either business units or two whole businesses together?
Well, I will say very early on, and well ahead of making an acquisition. So, it's kind of been my standard to have a 30, 90, 180 day plus plan, months before we even get into an acquisition. And as we're in that process of knowing that we've signed essentially, a lot of people don't understand an LOI, a letter of intent, right? And that means that we're basically agreeing there's a certain amount of days we're going to work to close this deal down. And usually, as you get into that LOI, you start to say, okay, now we've got to work with the team, and we're going to be able to work with that management team. There's going to be a lot of data shared back and forth, but we're also going to have management sessions, and we're going to talk about how are we going to do this? What does that look like? What is the timing? What are the key factors? And all of those different components. So it starts well before the acquisition happens, if you're doing it right, to say, this is how we're going to do this. This is the plan. And it doesn't mean that you're going to have to adjust, not going to have to adjust after you close the deal, because things happen and you learn different things, and you get into it. But you really want to have that plan in place and really figure out how you're going to do that well before you acquire the company, because if not, you're really going to be behind the 8 ball once you make that close.
Yeah, yeah. And how do you assess what the challenges are, and how much do you actually really get to know the other party and what they're truly about before you do the deal? How close can you get to it?
You do your best. There's always an interesting dance when you're going through that acquisition process of, I want to give them some, but I can't give them all, because then that might change the pricing of the deal, right? Or the way that goes down, if they start sharing some things that maybe they're not putting out there, because that would devalue the acquisition. So there's definitely pieces of, there's a little dance where we're trying not to do too much to say, this is how much we value what you're doing, and they're trying to do well, I don't want to expose everything, because there is a pricing dance in that, and it comes all the way down to the very end, because I think a lot of people don't understand. You might sign a letter of intent that says this is our purchase price, but that purchase price is usually based on a multiple of EBITDA in our space, right? And so that EBITDA can change all the way down to the very end. And so if they close a quarter before close, that dollar amount can change. So it is an interesting dance. It is an interesting piece. So no, you're not always going to get all the information, but you try to get as close to them. You try to build relationships with them where you can start to build that trust, so that once day one comes, you're ready to go and get insights into some of those things they might not have wanted to share with you through the process.
Yeah, and I can imagine when you're assessing and looking at a business, you might be able to see certain things more easily than others. So financially, there's probably certain things that are far more visible. But when you look at the culture aspect, how do you get to assess culturally what a business is like? Because I can imagine that can sometimes really determine how well the integration process can go.
Yeah, it's that's a really interesting question, because you do your best to assess it through these management meetings and talking to different layers of management as you can. You really don't want to go beyond the true executive team in the beginning, because you don't want people in that tent and understanding what's going on. And there's many reasons for that. I could go into that. That would be a whole nother diatribe, and I don't want to go there. But it is, it is about assessing the best you can when you're having those conversations and trying to build those relationships, what that culture really looks like. And I've seen it go many different ways, in all honesty. I've seen companies where felt like the culture was great and you got in and you realized, man, they're not communicating with the staff. They're not really, involving people. You find these, pods of, silos because nobody's working together across the organization. And that is a really big challenge culturally. I have walked in the door, done all hands calls, and employees go, "We've never done that before. We didn't know what that was about." And then you walk into companies where the executive team comes off very tight and you're like, "Oh, this might be a little interesting." And then you get in and it's actually because they're really protecting their people. They really care about their people. And everybody will tell you that. Everybody will tell you, we care about our people. We care about, regardless of what they say. You got to get a feel for that. And so then when you feel like they're kind of shutting you off, it's actually because they actually want to protect their people and they do care. And so you get in and you find a culture that you're, all right, well, this is great. This is exciting. And they really have the right structure in place. So it can be all over the place. But for me, culture starts, in that process, building that relationship with those leaders. But for the company and digging in and figuring it out. And it starts day one, the day after the close. I'm there. We're doing an all hands call. We're, on site wherever they are and in the most mass. We're going to be there to communicate and make sure that we're trying to give them a message from the beginning of, this is a great culture. This is what we want to do. This is what we're about. And then it's about building upon that. And again, in this specific situation, I've been here pretty much every week for 2 months since we've closed this deal. Trying to spend time and make sure the teams are comfortable and understand what we're trying to build from a culture and an organizational perspective.
Yeah, so it sounds like communication is key. I was going to say, what are the fundamentals of deals done? Where do you even start? Do you have a playbook? Is it kind of, that you built up over the years from your experience? Where do you start when you're looking to integrate two businesses together? You're obviously
Yeah.
visible.
Yeah. And it is. It's that 30, 90, 180-day plan
Yeah.
playbook that I talked about. Because then what we do is we build that out and we make sure we have all the different components. You do sales, finance, operations, like all the different components of the business. And then you talk about what has to happen in those timeframes. And then what happens then is, I've been fortunate enough in each of my organizations to have a project management organization that you go to the project management team and you go, all right, here's a playbook we built. Let's build that into our project management tool. And then they start to go in and really build from there. And then they dive deeper and they go, okay, yes, this is the main topic. This is the main thing we're trying to achieve. But what are all the things that have to happen to make that happen as they dive in with the leadership? And, that's one thing, our head of project management is here with us this week. She's already been here before. She's doing that on site with the teams to make sure that, they are working directly with her and understanding that. And she does an amazing job at what she does. She used to work for me at another company as well. I knew how amazing she was, and I was super happy to be able to get her over here. But she's so good at working with people to understand that. And it really is taking that overall framework, building it into a project management tool, and having a project management tool that really then can get into the details that are necessary to accomplish that. And just keeping the focus. As you said, communication is such a huge part of it. It really is. We're communicating top down, but we're trying to get them to understand we need you to communicate all the way back up with us. And that's why I've also been here is I've had conversations with all all different types of employees across the organization. Come in, sit down, give me your feedback, tell me about what's going on, because I want to understand and I want to know what that's about. So it really is about planning and communication, and those are really the two key components that I focus on every time as we go through an integration.
Yeah, that's great. And I want to talk about the workforce because, it must be. I know it's an industry where people experience this fairly regularly, and more often, as we've said in other industries. But it can create some uncertainty, some excitement too, by the way. But and people might be sitting there worried about what does this mean for me, and what does this mean for the team or the business unit or whatever it might be. So how do you approach it from that aspect, in terms of the workforce and considering how they're feeling at this sort of at this time?
Yeah, I mean that really goes back to that point of allowing them to come in and communicate, but also communicating in these all hands calls on a monthly basis and allowing them to ask questions and being open to opening the floor to any questions that the employees have and giving them an honest answer. Because a lot of the times I can't answer that question right now. What I can do is here is the plan, here's what we're working through, here is the timeline. Because each time usually especially in an acquisition like the one we've done now with Hivelocity, we were two equally sized companies, right? And so there's a lot that comes together, and you got to figure out what that org structure is going to look like. Because even though we're two equally sized companies, they were really focused in BareMetal. It's 90% of their business, and we had the cloud piece, the Colo piece, the data center piece. They had some data centers as well. Obviously, you have to have the BareMetal component, but it was how is all that going to come together, and how are we going to structure that? And so that's where we try to just communicate as much as possible. And I when we built the mission, vision, values of this organization shortly after I joined, we did that based on Lencioni's Advantage book. And one of those things is communicate clarity, over communicate clarity, continue to, and it is all about that communication. So that's the way we do it is we make sure our leadership team is aligned on the message we're going with, the answers to the questions. You put those frequently asked questions out there right day one with the employee base. And then you're just open to questions and communication. And that's the way you start to get them comfortable understanding, okay, they've got a process, they're open to answering questions, they're open to communicating, they're over communicating with us. That's the best we can do to help them feel comfortable. And I feel like, we really haven't seen here in this process people leaving because I think we've helped them feel comfortable that this is going to be a positive transition and we've got a lot of opportunity here.
Yeah, I mean the attrition rate might sort of answers part of my next question, but how do you manage and measure success in that sort of period of integration? You mentioned about the playbook and having periods sort of milestones. How do you measure your success and manage your success in that period of time?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. One of those is attrition during that period of time. Look, you're going to have it. There's no way you're not going to have it because no matter how much you communicate, certain people just maybe they already had an issue and this just amplifies that, whatever that looks like. But you look at the attrition numbers and you try to stay close on that and understand so that you have an idea of is your message getting out there, and so you look at that. But I mean, we look at how are we doing against the project plan, honestly, at the end of the day. And one of the things I loved presenting to the board 3 weeks ago in our first board meeting, newly formed board, was that we were able to show that the 22 tasks we had to complete within 15 days of close, we completed every one of them within those 15 days, right? And so then it was what's on that 30-day timeline. We've accomplished everything within that 30-day timeline. So if we're continuing to achieve tasks throughout 15, 30, 90, 180 days, then we know we're successfully doing that. And then you got to evaluate the quality of the work that's done, because you can complete those tasks, but maybe you didn't do it great. And you're going to feel that. But you assess the quality of how things are moving forward. How is that affecting the employee base? Are they seeing the improvements and the ability of working together as teams? So that's really how, to me, we assess how are we doing throughout this process.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you mentioned communication and having a really structured plan. So you might say that my next question is about the pitfalls that businesses fall into. So you may just say, well, doing the opposite of everything we're trying to do ourselves. But what are the pitfalls, do you think, that not necessarily that I'm not asking you to reveal pitfalls that you've been experience you've had yourself, but just generally, where do you think business leaders might go wrong when they start bringing businesses and business units together?
I think I won't speak specifically to what I've seen, but just saying generally what I
Yeah.
have seen from ones that have gone wrong. One big one is not properly evaluating what that company is doing at the end of the day. I've watched companies acquire companies that they thought were aligned with them in terms of business, but technically they were doing something very, very different that was very specialized. And then that company said, well, we can't do that at scale and size. And so now it's like that customer base expects you to do that. And that you go, well, we're not going to do that. and you attrit a lot of that customer base. So you wind up with this massive customer churn. And I've watched that really, really hurt an organization. So a lot of that is in the evaluation. But then the second part is having a plan and just not really sticking to executing on that and allowing other distractions to come into play. You got to continue to build an organization in terms of revenue. But if you start focusing too much, and I literally just had this conversation with the head of product and development 2 weeks ago. He was like, well, how do we balance product development right now versus integration? And I said, integration comes first, right? We've already got some products that are on the path, and then they're what we need, and we're good right now to go sell the market with plenty to cross sell across the organizations. So we're going to take a slight pause on that product piece and really focus on that integration, because if you start trying to bring in these product lines as you're trying to integrate technologies and you're trying to really pull those two together, that can create a lot of issues. You create a lot of complexity that's not necessary, and you can bog down the integration. And the longer an integration takes, the more impact you're going to have on the business. You're not going to be able to realize the number of synergies that are there that were the whole model was built on. And that creates challenge to the bottom line of a business. And so those are just a couple of ways that I've seen that you kind of got to avoid. You got to prioritize that integration. You got to keep sight on it. You got to continue to communicate. And again, there's that important part of truly evaluating a business for how it operates and what it really does.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like integration is the number one. That whole process is the foundation for the future success of the organization.
100%. They will tell you that 40% of businesses that fail are because of an unsuccessful integration after a merger, right?
Oh.
And it is absolutely critical to get it right. Unsuccessful integration can really, really impact a business.
Yeah. And having, as you described at the top of the episode, your experiences of even finding your own businesses to acquire, which is really impressive, by the way. How much of that experience are you drawing on now in this process as CEO? How much has that helped and formed what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely helpful. I mean, the background that I have, it's interesting because I was on a call that included my private equity team, and the people we were talking to asked, well, what is your biggest challenge? And I went into some stuff, around, just things in the industry that were going on, and some of the things that I'm focused on to make sure that we're in the right place and we're aligned. And my private equity guy goes, "Yeah, Jeremy, but what about integration? Doesn't that keep you up at night?" And I go, "Well, that's a really great point, but I just don't think about it because it's so inherent in what I've done for so long that I just naturally feel like this is a comfortable process, and I know where the pitfalls that you talked about are. I know, what it looks like if things start to get off track, if there's not the proper focus." And so you're right, absolutely, that should be a risk and a concern for the business. But that background of me doing it over and over again and learning from experiences that were negative, and learning how to change from that, it really is extremely helpful for me as I'm sitting in the seat now to kind of, it's different because I used to be able to be so into the integration of every piece of it, and as the ops guy, like I was there and making sure all of it, and it's this trust but verify mentality. And now I'm relying on my team, but that's why I bring people that I know I can trust, that I know are really, really good at this, to do this, because now I have to trust them to do it with the intensity and the passion that I did it. And so that's the real difference, is sitting here and going, I can guide you guys that direction, but you guys really have to execute. And I'm very fortunate. Both of these companies here right now in this integration are very passionate about getting this done. They're excited about what we're doing. So we're seeing even more productivity than I've been used to, because both sides are so highly engaged.
That's really good. And that's what I was going to say. I know it's a sensitive time for and when you go through integration periods, but also how fulfilling is it when you can see it coming together, Jeremy, and it starts to really sort of knit together and start to take shape.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I've said this a couple times over the last 3 or 4 weeks. I don't know if I understood what a CEO job meant, that I would have taken this role. Um, because it definitely has a number of pieces of things that like keep you up at night that are really, you're responsible for what is now 175 employees' lives. And I take that personally. That means something to me. I want to make this a great place for them to work. I want to make it a great place for them to be a platform for their career. And so, for all of the things that are very hard to deal with and very challenging that keep me up at night at things I think about on a constant basis. Those types of things are extremely fulfilling and really exciting to see, to watch these people be successful and watch them do these amazing things. That's very inspiring for me, and it means a lot to me in that positive way. So it's always a balance of the positive and the
Yeah.
negative in this world, but that's one of those things I really enjoy watching the teams be very successful and really seeing the passion of it coming together.
Yeah, could definitely from the conversations sort of now, but also previous, definitely sense that from you that that human element is so important. And yeah, absolutely, that's really good. So moving on to the next 12 months, I know you probably can't reveal too much. I'm not looking for a scoop or sensationalize anything, but what the next 12 months look like for what's going on with you guys now and for you personally?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, integration is number one right now. Still a long way to go in that process. I really think we should be able to do this within a year's time frame of having everything pulled together and having the systems and technology built across the board that really give us a platform to grow to the levels that we want to, $200 million plus, right? That's where we'd love to go to. And so I feel like we're going to be in that place here in the next year, which is really exciting to think about that. But we're launching Cloud 2.0 at the end of next month, which is, our new private cloud solution. Latest technology, really, really great, backed by, Veeam, Zerto, different products to be able to really create a solid private cloud solution, which ties right into our BareMetal solutions, our VPS solutions. We're looking at we have great network automation within the data centers, but how do we start to create a connectivity fabric across the board that connects all of those data centers and gives customers an automated capability to connect it all themselves, without us having to be involved if that's where they want to go. So, for us, we've got a lot of great products on the truck. Launching this cloud platform is going to be huge for us. But it's really focused on that integration, rolling out the product sets that we have right now. Hivelocity just recently released their VPS platform here in the last 6 months. We're seeing significant growth in that, which is really, really exciting for us. So we've got some great products. We got some great cross-selling going on. I think I'd like to get this integration complete before I do another acquisition. Can't tell you whether that'll happen or not. But those are the great dreams that I have, is that I can actually complete one before I start the next one, and go from there.
Yeah, that sounds exciting times. I know I'll be definitely watching from the sidelines and rooting for you guys. Just on the general world of mergers and acquisitions, how do you see that in the next few years? Because it looks like it's going to be hectic, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's going to continue to be interesting. I mean, again, you read daily, weekly publications of all the acquisitions that happen. They keep saying at some point there's going to be this point where it's going to be all the big players and all of that. But I think you continue to see new players coming into the space, and you don't hear about it until they're 2 to 3 years in. But you look at the growth of companies like Lambda in the midst of AI, as you talked about, and a number of other CoreWeave. Right, you got a number of companies coming up in that space, and now in the data center space, you have these companies that aren't even ever going to touch the data center. Basically, they acquire the land, they do all the permitting, they get everything ready, and they get it ready for somebody to come build it, right? And then somebody can come in, just build it, do that part of it, and then hand it over to somebody else to operate, right? Like, there's so many pieces in this business today compared to where we were before, that it as much as you think, well, there can only be so much acquisition, there continues to be so many new entrants into the space that I feel like you're just going to continue to see it grow and move, and you're going to continue to see companies coming together. So, we're excited about that. I mean, there's still hundreds and hundreds of players in this space. So I don't see an end to it in the next 3 to 5 years for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Me neither. Now, the last question before I go, I know that you said at the top of the call that you were in IT very young in terms of you had IT at home when you were growing up. So, but if you hadn't have gone that route, where would you be now? What would you have gone into? Like, would you be on the PGA or the Live Tour or something? Or
Oh, Dell, that would be the dream, wouldn't it? Like,
wouldn't it?
trust. Yeah. No, I mean, look, I was very competitive in sports. I played varsity football, basketball, baseball, soccer. So I was very involved in sports, but I didn't really take up golf until I was almost like 18 years old. So I don't know that that was in my future. But right now, where do I wish I was? I absolutely wish I was out there playing on the PGA Tour. I'd say I probably would be one of the old school guys that wouldn't go over to live and take that paycheck. Like, I'm just a competitor through and through. And so you got to give me pure competition. Don't give me a paycheck just because you want to put my name out there.
500,
But
$500 million and you wouldn't go to the Live Tour.
I wouldn't go. I'm telling
No,
you.
there's a man of
No, I
principle right there.
a man of principle. Yes, absolutely. I mean, look, I'm saying that right now. Who knows? If they offered that to the 20 something me, maybe that's a different story. But I'd like to think I would be strong enough. But yeah, I would have loved to play golf for a living. That would have been amazing. And honestly, outside of that, I think, I just I really enjoy communicating, coaching, mentoring, all of that. And so I coached high school sports early on in my career, as well as select sports. And so, I felt like my career trajectory, I was doing development in the mornings, like I was getting in super early, coding at 6 a.m. and doing my thing so that I could go coach high school sports. And then in the night, I was coaching select sports. And so it was a matter of whether my career was going to go down this IT path or whether it was going to go down the coaching path. So, short of a professional golfing career, I would say realistically, I think I could have gone down the coaching route. Um, and I'm happy to say that at the end of the day, technology allowed me to do that just
Mm.
with people in their careers. And it's something that's really meant something to me, is watch people develop and grow in their careers. And so I feel like I didn't miss too much in the sports, although I'm sure I would have loved it. But I almost feel like, as stressful as business is, coaching was so stressful. I feel like I don't know if that would have been good for my health at the end of the day. So I'm happy I ended up where I am at the end of the day.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. And I'm going to put as the headline for this show that you wouldn't take 400 or 500 million. That is a man of principle. Jeremy, thanks for coming on. Thanks for lifting the lid a little bit on business integration, because I really wish you the best of luck with the process you're going through now, and you guys at Colohouse and Hivelocity. And thanks for coming on the Data Center Exchange.
Thanks for having me, Del. It was a pleasure. Glad I could share my experience, and look forward to continuing the conversation in the future.
Great. Thank you.